Liz Truss is the shortest reigning Prime Minister of Britain. Yet her 44 days in the office have been more than just eventful. After coming into power as the successor to the already controversial Boris Johnson, her popularity was decimated after a mini-budget destroyed United Kingdom's economy. But then, after all of this, and what could be called mismanagement and misgovernance for merely 3 fortnights, she will now be eligible for a yearly £115,000 due to a provision called PDCA. How is that even possible? What is PDCA? Well, stay tuned to get to know more about this stipend. Liz Truss will receive £115,000 as a stipend from taxpayer money, even though there are reports of people skipping meals to ensure their bills are paid in the UK. Whether the shortest reigning PM of the UK even deserves this amount has become controversial. Does Truss deserve this handout when the UK is going through its most challenging economic period in many years? So, British politician Mary Elizabeth Truss held the position of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from September 6, 2021 to October 25, 2022, when she resigned amid a political and financial crisis. She held office for 44 days, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. Before David Cameron, Theresa May, and Boris Johnson, Truss held cabinet positions, including that of the Foreign Minister from 2021 to 2022. In addition, she had served as the South West Norfolk representative to the House of Representatives since 2010. Truss was the only Prime Minister to take office after Boris Johnson and not be received at Buckingham Palace by Elizabeth Yu, the Conservatives, the governing party in Parliament, duly chosen as their leader. The confirmation by Queen Elizabeth was one of the last official acts. After that, she was formally selected as the leader of the Conservatives, the current governing party in Parliament. One of the last formal acts the Queen performed before passing away 2 days later, on September 8, 2022, at the age of 96, was the selection of Truss as the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. During a special session of Parliament on September 10, 2022, Truss and other well-known lawmakers swore a fresh pledge of loyalty to Charles IOE. This was unnecessary because, at the beginning of each Parliament, MPs swear an oath to the Queen and their heirs and successors. 2 days after appointing Truss as the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Queen performed before passing away at 96. On September 10, 2022, during a special session of Parliament, Truss and other well-known representatives took a new oath of allegiance to Charles IOE. This was unnecessary because MPs swear a commitment to the Queen and their heirs and successors at the start of every Parliament. Truss introduced the Energy Price Guarantee, a 2-year cap on the cost per unit of domestic energy supply. Soon after taking office, the government estimates this strategy will cost the state £100 billion, while capping yearly home energy expenses at £2,500. On September 23, 2022, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor of the Exchequer appointed by Truss, announced a mini-budget that called for a substantial reduction in taxes. These taxes included the elimination of the top income tax rate of 45%, a reduction in the introductory income tax rate, the cancellation of increases in national insurance contributions and corporation tax, the elimination of the proposed health and social care levy, and a reduction in stamp duty. However, financial markets had an unfavorable opinion of the budget, which they blamed for the rapid decrease in the pound value and compelled the Bank of England to take action. Truss gave Kwarteng the order to reinstate the 45% income tax extra rate on October 3 after initially supporting the mini-budget. Later, she undid the corporation tax reduction, fired Kwarteng, and appointed Jeremy Hunt in his place on October 14. Except for the declines in national insurance contributions and the increase in stamp duty, Hunt undid the remaining initiatives outlined in the mini-budget. Hunt also shortened the energy price guarantee from 2 years to 6 months. The budget was criticized by the opposition Labour Party, the IMF, U.S. President Joe Biden, and various members of Truss's party, including influential parliamentarians Grant Shapps and Michael Gove. In addition, it significantly impacted the popularity of the Conservative Party and Truss, which was unpopular with the general public. According to a YouGov poll, Truss was the least popular UK Prime Minister in history. Many other polls show that she was pretty unpopular. Liz Truss is qualified to receive a £115,000 or $129,306 a year allowance for the rest of her life, despite her little time as Prime Minister. With a 44-day employment period, Truss is eligible for the Public Duty Costs Allowance. The funds are not intended for personal use, but rather to assist former prime ministers in covering the extra expenses incurred by their participation in public life, such as staffing. However, some have argued that the funds should be used more effectively, and others have opposed the idea of the prime minister with the shortest tenure ever getting the rewards. A request for comment from Truss by Bloomberg was not immediately complied with. The Public Duties Costs Allowance is what? Following Margaret Thatcher's retirement as Prime Minister in 1991, John Major, the current Prime Minister, introduced the allowance. The National Cabinet Office makes payments to former leaders to cover office expenditures due to their unique position in public life. However, they are not permitted to use the funds for their expenses or to support their district office. The £115,000 cap is evaluated by the Prime Minister in office at least once every year. However, it hasn't changed since 2011. Following Margaret Thatcher's resignation, the then Cabinet Secretary, Sir Robin Butler, set up the Public Duty Costs Allowance, or PDCA, introduced by the then Prime Minister, John Major, in March 1991. What limitations apply to it? As long as they don't continue to serve as the leader of the official opposition in Parliament, all former Prime Ministers are entitled to receive compensation. For such, there is a separate compensation. The Cabinet Office will review and perhaps lower their payment if they accept a position with another public sector organization. Former officials cannot ask for money in advance of necessity. They must keep track of receipts and pay stubs and make them available on request to the Cabinet Office to demonstrate how the money is being used. Former leaders may continue to receive the allowance far into their later years. 3 months are allowed following a former Prime Minister's passing before staff salaries are resumed. The costs associated with closing the office will also be covered. All previous Prime Ministers are qualified to use the PDCA. However, if they are the leader of the opposition, they are not eligible for the allowance. The allowance level will be assessed in connection to the salary that the former Prime Minister will get from public funds, should they accept any government job. The PDCA has a budgetary cap that coincides with the MP's office's staffing allotment. The ceiling is now fixed at £115,000 and has been since 2011. In 2022 to 2023, it will stay locked at this level. The Prime Minister shall evaluate the limit's height annually and at the start of each new Parliament. Former Prime Ministers are qualified to request a pension allowance in addition to the funding granted to offset the expense of their staff pension. This is restricted to 10% of the quota at most. All incurred expenditures must be paid in full before the end of the year's first quarter, which comes immediately after the year being claimed to receive the core allowance and pension allowance. Which ex-prime ministers have the most claims? The Cabinet Office publishes the amount handed out to past prime ministers yearly. Here is a summary for the fiscal year that concluded on March 31, 2021. Sir John Major and Tony Blair, his successor, requested the full £115,000 in benefits. David Cameron and Gordon Brown each received about the maximum allowed, receiving £114,712 and £113,423, respectively. The least amount was claimed by Theresa May, or $57,832. Taxpayers spent £571,348 on the payments last year, including the cost of pensions for its employees. Boris Johnson would also be qualified to receive money, but we are not aware of any requests he may have made. What is the nature of the payments controversy? Given Truss' brief tenure as leader, many on social media urged her to decline the compensation. Some, particularly the opposing party, remarked that the annual sum was more significant than her wage during her month and a half in office, while others questioned how the funds could be better allocated. As the youngest member of Parliament in the UK and the representative for Nottingham East for the Labour Party, Nadia Whittome tweeted, "Because she was Prime Minister for 6 weeks, Liz Truss will be entitled to claim a £115,000 annual allowance for the rest of her life." In the UK, 1 in 7 people misses meals to pay their expenses. There is no way that she should be able to access the same £115,000 a year for Life Fund as her recent predecessors, all of whom served for well over 2 years, according to the Liberal Democrats. There you have it, folks. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, comment on whether you think Truss deserves to get a PDCA stipend.